long and wide about the staffing difficulties we're having in the jail and the programming difficulties. The culture of the inmate is way different, the expectations of the inmate are way different, and not just because of the fights and the things of that nature that are skyrocketing. The amount of grievances, the amount of problems, the amount of time that we're having to take trying to coordinate inmate programs, deal with inmate grievances, it's just a different breed of inmate. And we're really going to work moving ahead to try and blend different pots of money to end up funding a sergeant in that jail so we can get back to where there is a jail commander and a bona fide number 2 in there that can help, because it's just, it's a different world. So that's that carve out. 20,202 for HSS CCP. The executive committee is contemplating trying to figure out what benefit might come from the operation of a day reporting center. This goes on in a lot of different counties. It's a place where inmates that are out on alternatives to custody can report, go check in, be checked on, do drug tests,
Is
what
the
have
Health
you.
and Social Services doing that?
Yes, they are going to do almost like almost consultant for us, really.
Yeah, they're gonna hire a part-time person to look into the viability of one, and if we did one, what it should look like and so on. Correct?
Well, Shasta County's got one, I know, following it in the record searchlight, they got one up and running this past spring, and it's been kind of controversial. There's some people think it's wonderful, and others think it's not good at all.
Well, Shasta View, Plumas has a small one. Most jurisdictions now have them because between probation having people on supervised release and us having people on supervised release, it's a place where they can come.
Where are
or
they
we can
looking at
test them.
doing it? Over by did you have some space over by that building on the north side of the jail, that
Yeah,
modular?
we're looking at the modular potentially for a short term, and we'd love to have a real facility where it could operate it long term. But that's why we're hiring this consultant, or HSS is hiring a person part-time to help us look into that.
Kind of do a feasibility study, see if, is it doable, and if so, what's going to be the advantage. The next one's 75 grand for HSS. That's specifically for a contract for behavioral health services in the jail. That is a big deal. It was 50 last year. It's going to be 75 this year. That is, we can't overstate the importance of that. And like the sheriff said, we've had fewer violent encounters. We've had fewer outbreaks. And the difficulty, gentlemen, is all of this has taken place in a whole new landscape. We're not providing 75 grand worth of mental health services into what used to be the county jail with people who sat in jail for 6 months. So we're doing it against a population who might be there for 2.5 years. So as they get more dangerous, more violent, more dependent upon us, we're plugging more resources at them. And I don't know that we're ever going to be able to walk in and say, wow, we cut this by half. Because we're doing it in a totally different playing field than we used to.
I mean, part of this new landscape that we've all got to get our minds around, the state is giving us these prisoners. They couldn't afford to keep them, they didn't have the space to keep them, they aren't going to take them back. And so we are obligated to try to deal with them. I don't know, what you believe philosophically in whether or not you can fix bad people, but there's no better alternative than to try, to teach them how to not drink or do drugs or things that got them into criminality in the first place. I mean, it's a brand new role and responsibility for us that we didn't ask for, but we've got it.
The next piece, 278,542. That accounts for 35% of the service and supply costs to the county jail. Now, the sheriff had to bang away at that group and really had to lobby for this because that's a huge amount of carve out right out of that CCP allocation. There's a direct offset to county jail costs at the tune of 35% of the bottom half of that budget. So that really is. That was a nice recognition from the CCP to get that money there, because again, it costs money to keep people in jail. So that's how that figure was derived. And then you can see they've also set aside $202,578 for jail hospital. And we have billed every dollar of hospital expenses for realigned offenders back to the CCP and recovered 100% of those. So I think that's an important, it's another important piece. There's some bad things that have come with realignment, and it's not funded to the extent we need it. But to the extent that we're maximizing the funding that's getting here, we're really working. The sheriff really worked hard with that group to get a fair carve out for the sheriff's office, because right now that is the biggest impact.
And 52,578 of that is actually for
1213.
1213, yes. Cost incurred. After we spent everything that was allocated, and we went back to them and asked them to allocate that additional 52,000 to make up to help us pay pending bills from last year.
So last year they budgeted 100, we spent 152. We went back to the CCP and they kicked that other 52,000 and then propped up this year's to 150. So hopefully we'll continue that track record and continue to get full recoup on
What
that.
line you on?
That's on that, the 7,000, the operating transfer out to jail hospital, 202,578.
I have a question, this is really maybe more for Julie than for you, but you guys might be interested in looking at the fund summary, 13-14 recommended budget, Julie, it shows for the Fund 138, which is this budget right here that we just went through, we had an estimated fund balance of $292,017, and it shows estimated revenues $5,317,000. Total funds available, $5,609,000, and department requests of $5,165,000, and CAO's recommended $5,490,000 and change, and then the fund balance projected at the end would be $118,745. And we got $1,194,000 here, and so where's the other $4 million? Is that
That's probably
just?
for Karen, that's that LR.
Health and Social Services is part of the realignment. That's the
AB
big part.
109 realignment?
It's, yes. AB 109 realignment.
I
And
thought
what-
AB 109 basically dealt with the,
The budget we gave you
No.
just addresses.
I know, I realize that, but I
There's a
was,
whole nother
We
piece.
have to be, when we talk about realignment nowadays, we have to distinguish between public safety realignment and 1991 health and social service realignment.
so this is more than just, because this is marked as AB
Right.
109, so I think,
It was part of that.
If
So
you
you
look,
have
Okay.
CCP, you have.
I just noticed there, Jerry, because I'm focusing on the AB 109, and I'm going like, holy moly,
When you
there's
get
$5
into your,
million.
when you get into your sheet, so you'll see Fund 138 is realignment.
Right.
So we're talking about budget unit 0551. That's the specific carve out we're talking
Well,
about.
I'm looking at the summary here, and so I just need to make myself an.
if you look on page 14 of the revenues, that's where the other 3 budget units are, and that comes up with your total revenue.
Okay, I just, that's fine, I'm gonna make myself a little side note here, so that I.
One of your budget policy questions with this budget unit is that this program is funded by a portion of the state sales tax and little BLF. And the state is projecting that dedicated amount of money could go up. And how that money is allocated is the formula, Sheriff, it says that we've been fighting over. Under the formula that's been submitted to the State Department of Finance, which they have not yet approved, we are in line to get about $145,000 of extra, which is not in here. Now, everybody is saying, don't count on that dough until you see it in the bank, but potentially, sometime during this year, we could get an increase of about 145, which is not accounted for in this budget.
And there's a fair chance that if that happens, Marty, that we may be back in front of the CCP lobbying heavy for more correctional officers out of that realignment money. It just really depends on how things shake out and with the staffing analysis we're gonna have done to help us, make a determination.
We won't get many for 145.
We might get a pair.
Can I make a comment? Sure. Some of the things, on these budget units, like you said, they're, cost neutral, or there's, like, on the scanner, there's $1 DMV money, but what makes it so difficult to, maybe I'm a lone ranger on this, but it shows all the expenses, but it seems like, unless you've been looking at these for 2 decades, or, you really, this was like what you did every single day. Why isn't this made where some of the things, like the scanner, for instance, right underneath it, shows the income or estimated income for the DMV, so it basically balances out to 0. Then we're dealing with 2 sets of numbers. One that are cost neutral with these things, where it shows 780,000, but just like the Doc Meadows things, like we're scrutinizing, we're saying, geez, and then like John's defending it and saying, well, it's 5,400, it's a good bang for your buck, which it is and all that, but then in the conversation as it unfolds, it's paid for anyway out of the health and what, you know, so it's like you're beating your head against the wall trying to figure out where to save money. Some of these things are on here as an expense, but they're actually paid for, so it's really not an expense. So then the overall public safety budget says, what is it, like 10.2 million. But of that, I don't know how many million is
It's offset by revenue.
offset by revenue. So it's like there could be a way easier way to really analyze. You have your cost neutral expenses, and then you break down the ones that you really are coming out of the county's back pocket. And those are the ones that we should be scrutinizing more so than all the cost neutral stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
why isn't it like that? I don't understand.
Well, the difficulty though, Larry, what happens at the level below here, between us, departments, the CAO's office, the auditor, this one page is 5 pages. It's a summary sheet, it's a budget sheet, it's a personnel sheet that shows every employee and what they cost line by line by line. And then the one behind that is a revenue sheet to show what supports that. So your 140-page budget that ends up at the board would be a 450-page budget if you had every piece of detail. So, I mean, it's there, it
Well,
exists. It's-
Can I answer it a little bit differently, and that's a great question, and it's not for 20 years, I can say for 40 years, it's been like that. And I think, and Karen would probably jump in on it, because they just changed it here about 4 or 5 years ago now, but back in 1962, or sometime in the early 60s, they had the County Budget Act at the state level, because they're collecting this kind of data, not just from one county, but they're dealing with it for 58 counties, and so the state controller's office needs to, bring all the data in, and, they have to fit certain widgets and holes and squares and round pegs and the like, because they have to put together reports that they submit to Washington, basically, and so that uniformity came about as a result of particularly the federal and state programs that came in. So all these like budget categories that why we have it in this kind of format is because this is the format it has to go in. So they can literally slice through, a line item like this for us is one county, but there's 57 other counties right next to it. We're county number 18, so they can do a sum total of what that is across the board. So we have to kind of adapt that process, but I agree with you. What we need to be able to do is come up with a model, and that's basically what Julie and the county administration has to do, because Karen's administering this, not only the expenditure, and that's a big part of what the controller's office is all about, is to be able to quantify it that way, but we need to also be able to cut through it and look at the things that we actually have some meaningful say on, and the other stuff that's basically dictated by, the state laws and the state, and that's the reason why it's in the format that we have. It's a very, and then if you do like the fair, where we go from July 1 to June 30th, the fair stuff was always like January 1 to December 31st, so they had to take 6 months out of this budget and 6 months out of this other budget and put the two together. Yeah, and with the fair being in July, you talk about creating nightmare, even the accountants go tilt after a while.
Yeah. But I can imagine it is, I don't mean to say why isn't it like this, like geez, I know everybody's working like extra hard. I couldn't even fathom how much work it is for, you got, I'm not trying to belittle the process or saying, that it's a simple fix, but I'm just saying that it seems like our eyes should be more focused on the part where it's not cost neutral, and there is no revenue stream, instead of this whole big gigantic bunch of numbers, of which half of them, I don't mean to say insignificant, but they're already paid for. Sorry, Karen.
Right. You know what, I agree with you 100%. When you're looking at expenditures, I look at revenues first, because how do you know what you can spend if you don't know how much you have, right? So, a solution would be to take your revenue sheet in the budget, and when you're talking about a certain fund and budget unit, look at the revenue from the revenue summary as well, so you can kind of see what matches up. When you get into if, there's no one set way you could do it. If you put it, it would end up more confusing if you put notes or them underneath each other. So we're kind of limited just in trying to keep it digestible. I sent emails to everybody and referred to this budget book, and Schedule 9 actually has by budget unit, all the revenues that are related to that budget unit and the expenditure. And it has last year's budget plus a 2-year history of actuals, so you can see what each budget unit is costing, the trend or historically.
I
So,
did get, can I come by after and get one of those books?
sure.
Okay.
I just, to back up for a minute, and I wanna, we were referred to page 14 dealing with the public
Sure.
safety realignment, and we were told that that 4 million is basically the health side of that. And I think we need to look at doing something with our labeling, the way this is labeled, because it shows, I'm on page 14 now, the revenue side, looking at the detail of where that 5,317,000 is being, revenue coming from. And it shows the Fund 138, budget unit 551, with the sales tax, which is the 1,021,000 that is relating to this particular page that John just gave us, Dean gave us a breakdown on. And then there shows budget unit 552, there's $16,000 which relates to the DA and public defender, which is that other part you talk about besides this 5,000 here, so that is clear. And then we have 117,000, which is state public safety realignment sales tax. This is all grouped under the 8109 category. It says YOBG, Y-O-B-G grant, and I have no idea what that 117,000 is and how it relates to this, but that probably is something that
That's for
comes up in
probation.
probation. Well, then we have 100, Fund 138, budget unit 0554, and it shows state PS, public safety, realignment sales tax. There's no references to health or any of the the 1991 realignments, and there's $4,162,050. So, is this here,
I know some other programs that got realigned, that were part of that, were like our CalMet, it's a drug task force fund.
Rural crime and cops.
Yeah, rural crimes, cops, state cops.
well, but if you take the rural crimes and cops money, that comes up to about not quite $1 million right there. I mean, we're talking about $4,162,000. That's sort of kind of like, what is this? And I mean, that's a pretty good chunk of change, because that's 4 times what you just, of the value, what you just talked about in this one page here. So, and that doesn't appear to be part of the 1991 public health, mental health, all those realignments that we did there, because I'm sure that's in another section of the revenue page here. So what is this 1380554 fund, and where does that $4 million come in here?
It's health and social services, and certainly I can label that fund.
Well, I think, yeah, you might want to make a differentiation, because if a layperson's looking at that, and a board member is a layperson, the last thing that would come in my mind is that is public health, mental health, or anything to deal with H&SS. That looks like AB 109, and it's all cop related. And so
It's all health and social services, and if you look under, I just have this under tab 5 because previously probation has prepared this budget, but it's, the expenditure portion is, for 0554 is under tab 5, I think it's the 5th page. And then if you want, and there, that's entirely labeled as transfers out, and this is provided to me by Health and Social Services, so if you want to see where that goes, you'll have to look under tab 15.
okay.
And under tab 15 on page 4 of the transfer schedule, I believe I'm getting there, is where all this money goes around. So
Okay,
it's in
well-
this little box here, the 4,162,050. So if you look at the bottom of page 4 on the transfer schedule, it'll tell you where it transfers in and where it transfers out. And I'm really familiar with this because this was really hard to set up this year. So you
Yeah, here
have
it
to.
is. Okay, here's your 4 million, it is 138,055.1, but
And I only have this.
Okay.
I know a number of our programs are realigned as part of that. Court security.
I have this cheat sheet here.
No, go ahead.
Larry,
you got it.
Sorry.
Oh, hey, you're good.
Like, as a for instance, okay, when we talked, the first one we talked about was Fund 111, the boat patrol, and it was said it was cost neutral, so it was revenues to offset, which is like, perfect, but then like you said, you know, the information on the revenues over here, so you match it up and all that, so, okay, so this one here, okay, it says that it's basically, the CAO recommended 270,483. So so then so if you go to the Fund 111, or the 111-0520, so those add up to 170. So is it, so I'm just trying to think, is there some sort of carryover balance? Or
Yes.
Is that how it balances out?
Correct.
But
And
then
that's
the
on this,
carryover balance, is that somewhere else?
no, that's on the summary sheet. So on these budget documents, you really have to take the three reports. The summary, which has your fund balance, revenues, which is about a 20-page document, and then the expenditures. And as you go to each fund, you know, start with fund balance and then look at each revenue and expenditure for each budget unit.
So in this case here, the fund 0520 had a fund balance of basically 100,000. The CAO recommended 270, and then income is basically 170.
Correct.
So then it's sort of, yeah, okay.
That's it.
So we actually need to have about a 90-day workshop.
But you know what? It does get much easier after about 20 years.
You'll make it.
Well, and we, you know, obviously we try to put emphasis on the ones that we know. We try to put emphasis on the ones that we know are not cost neutral, but we figured since we had a new board member and you weren't able to make our presentation a couple years ago where we did a comprehensive one, we figured we'd cover it, just so you
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Right.
But we know the biggest cost really is patrol and jail.
Right, and I would also add too that a lot of the information that I present to the board focuses on general fund, public safety, and probation, because that's where, like, the majority of the general fund discretionary dollars are spent. General fund does not contribute to the road fund. It doesn't it doesn't contribute to welfare assistance. Except for maybe, anyway, there may be an exception to that. So I provide information on those three funds because that's where you get to make the choices. And if we look at everything, it just gets totally overwhelming.
And I would agree, I mean, it always comes down to the backfill the general fund has to put in public safety, probation, and.
Right. And
sheriff's
you have
department
other
probation.
things that are, aren't encroach on that kind, from other areas.
Well-
But that's where the majority of the costs are.
The only caution I have is, I mean, I think we need to focus on just what our local dollars go for, but we have to understand the relationship of a number of the state and federal dollars require a certain amount of, like, say, a local match, and what that relationship or ratio is will, in some cases, fluctuate, and how we allocate those out. I mean, so I think following the threads on some of these here or there, if we just rely on autopilot, that this is the way we've always done it, so
Right.
therefore it's always done that way for 20 years, at a point in time, pretty soon they're gonna be telling you, yeah, here's your local dollars, and these are your discretionary dollars, but we're sorry to inform you that 98% of them have already been pre-allocated based on some given, like this kind of a conversation we have today will make a determination, but 20 years from now, are they gonna be living by that determination we made today rather than revisiting it? And I don't think it needs to be revisited every year. Usually when we get a new board member coming on, we try to get into these kind of detailed discussions. We did this in a comprehensive fashion a couple of years ago, but I gotta tell you, between 2 years ago and today, I've already learned 3 new things that I would have thought I would have known 2 years ago, let alone 10 years before that. And 20 years ago, we made a bunch of determinations when it came to how the teeter program and all that works, and it's been on autopilot since, and I'm not blaming staff and I'm not faulting staff, they're just doing based